I wanted to speak about um, an article I read. There's a lot of background noise. I'm not sure they're doing yard work outside, but I wanted to speak in regards to an article I read about Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City and his plans to reduce the purchasing or the consumption of processed meat in schools, hospitals, and prisons. I think his goals were to reduce them by 50% by 2040 or something like that. And I really, on one hand, appreciate that this is being acknowledged, but it's listed as the reasons for doing this is in an effort to curb climate change because uh, meat is such a polluting industry, and especially cattle farming is so destructive for the environment and contributes to climate change. And of course, processed meat has been recognized by the WHO at the UN as being carcinogenic and unhealthful for a long time. In fact, I believe there was a quote about processed meats being the cigarettes of this generation, something that is known to be cancer causing, harmful to the health, but is so ingrained in the culture that it's very hard to step away from it. And so, while I do appreciate Mayor de Blasio's efforts to acknowledge the health effects of consuming meat, especially processed meat, as well as the implications for climate change that supporting this type of unsustainable agriculture causes, I can't help but think it's too late. It's too little too late because by 2040, we may already see major areas of our Earth underwater due to global warming. Um, Kids that are being fed processed meat and just meat in general in schools right now are already developing the habits of what they prefer in terms of eating, and they may be at higher risk for cancer by 2040. They will be in their 30s, some of them. So, um, and of course, the very notion that hospitals, as part of their prepared meals, are participating in the promotion of meat and dairy is disturbing, and it just kind of goes back to the idea, at least for me, that hospitals maybe want to prevent death but aren't that concerned. The medical system in America doesn't seem to be that concerned in the general health of the population, just keeping them alive. So by whatever means necessary, if that means obese, if that means diabetic, if that means completely reliant on medication with failing organs, um, that's not really a concern as long as the heart is still beating, the person is still alive, even with machines sometimes, then that's viewed as successful, which I think is a completely backward way of looking. So I wanted to acknowledge that I did see that article about Mayor Bill de Blasio um, saying that this is something that needs to be addressed, but in law and in policy, it moves so slow, and we can't afford to wait until 2040 to cut meat consumption back. It's damaging the planet now, and it's damaging people's bodies now. So it's both encouraging that it's at least being acknowledged, but also very disappointing and discouraging because these issues need to be addressed with more urgency, and the knowledge is already out there and the information is already available. Um, this isn't a secret. It's not a mystery that um, meat and processed meats and animal products in general are carcinogenic. That's not a surprise to anyone. That's been published information. Um, and it's also not a surprise or a mystery or a gray area in terms of the environmental impact that farming, agriculture, in particular beef, uh, beef cattle, have on the environment. So I just wish this information was, even though it is available and is public knowledge to a degree, I wish it was more ingrained in people's consciousness and conscience. And I wish that lawmakers would act with more urgency. And I think that maybe part of the reason why they are not taking it so seriously is, or as much of a crisis as, reacting with as much of a crisis mentality as they should, is because these people are all 50, 60 years old. And in 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, they'll be nearing the end of their life. But what about the people that are my age, who will be just midlife at that age, or or the kids in schools like starting kindergarten now? By the time 2040 comes, they'll be nearly 30 years old, and they will have already kind of been on a trajectory towards terminal illness, whether they've been developing habits over an entire lifetime towards, a preference for meat products, a preference for processed foods. And if intervention needs to happen, it needs to happen now. Delaying does no good. So those are my thoughts, and I suppose I could speak more on this at a different time, maybe with more clarity and conciseness. But I just wanted to acknowledge that I do see potential and benefit from the mere recognition in lawmakers and in government servants acknowledging this long known knowledge, but at least moving towards a recognition and an action, a reaction to it. But at the same time, it's such a slow process, and we need more people to care now because we're in dire straits, and it's becoming more acknowledged, but not by enough people and not quick enough. So those are my thoughts. Thank you. Bye.